Evening.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting for the Town of Middleton Board here, Wednesday, November 13th, 7 p.m. here at the Fuller Meadows School. Please silence your phones. And before we get going, I do want to do a quick review and clarification of our agenda. First thing, we will be doing an approval of minutes from prior meetings. We have one A&R plan, which shouldn't take too long, followed by two separate public hearings. First public hearing is to allow accessory dwelling units per state guidelines with some restrictions put in place by the Town of Middleton to the bylaw. The second public hearing was created to discuss a new MBTA Communities Act bylaw to figure out whether there was an appetite with the planning board to put forward a new bylaw at a special town meeting in December. This is not related to the citizens petition, which has already been filed at the town clerk's office. There is a separate meeting for the MBTA Communities bylaw next week on the 20th. I kindly ask that anyone who wishes to speak on the MBTA citizens petition bylaw that they reserve their comment until the 20th. That said, I'll welcome any general discussion on the MBTA Communities bylaw. I also plan to bring in a member of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee to discuss some potential feedback from their board related to the previously voted on bylaw in the spring. Any questions? Happy to discuss those when we open the public hearing. So first, approval of minutes. We do not have minutes for our October 24th meeting yet, but we do have them for October 9th. I will accept a motion on the minutes from October 9th.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from October 9th,
Thank you.
2024.
Do we have a second?
Yep, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Do we have a representative from the petitioner for the 70 North Main Street A&R plan?
Jill Mann here on behalf of Nancy and John Jack Jones, the owners of the property that's known as 70 North Main Street. I'm here this evening to seek an endorsement that the particular plan does not represent a subdivision. Basically, the property is large enough. It's in the R1A district, so it requires 20,000 square feet and 100 feet of frontage. It is an already developed property. So we needed to ensure that the property itself, or the home itself, complied with the 125-foot width requirement wherever the home was to be located. And we did actually place that on the plan. We did have a discussion with Mr. Fitzpatrick relative to how we were determining, the width. Every time we do the width, sometimes it's parallel to the street. It's supposed to be parallel to the street going back. And the plan originally had it kind of parallel with the frontage of the house instead of the street. But notwithstanding that, width requirement still was met, and that plan was resubmitted to Mr. Fitzpatrick for confirmation relative to that, because we can't create a nonconformity. So we couldn't subdivide the property and not make sure that the house complies with every dimensional requirement of the R1A district, which this particular plan does demonstrate. So what we're seeking to do essentially is to simply create that second lot as shown on the plan. It has the required frontage. When you go back, you can't develop a property if you reduce too much between the frontage and the home. It has to be 75% of the frontage. As you can see, it's 93 feet, 95 feet back. So we comply with that requirement relative to the new property. Accordingly, I would ask that this board endorse, not if I drop it, but endorse the plan that it does not represent a subdivision, so that we can file it with the registry. Thank you.
Thank you. Any feedback from anyone from the town or any board members?
And I actually should have said that. Welcome, Mr. Farmer.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate a new town planner in town. Look forward to working with you.
All All right, hearing no discussion, I will see if anyone wishes to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the new proposed plan.
Jason makes a motion to accept the plan as one not requiring an A&R plan, meeting the criteria of an A&R plan. Does anyone wish to second it?
Yeah, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have the Mylar, I just mounted it just in case somebody wanted to see, so it could be signed. That's it, we tape them, so I don't have to waste all the paper copies. I'll scan and then give you. Do you want them to sign a paper copy, or are you good just getting the electronic?
You can just give me electronic. Okay, thanks.
Jill, can you make this a little bit bigger?
Listen, I'm getting older, my eyes.
I hear you, it's perfect.
Oh, please.
Oh my goodness. Oh, let me see your pen.
Thank you very much, appreciate your time, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank
You too.
you.
Jill.
Moving on to our public hearings pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5. The following was posted, duly posted at Town Hall and at the town website for a public hearing on November 13th, 2024, 7 p.m. at the Fuller Meadows School, 143 South Main Street, to review a proposal to amend the zoning bylaw map to allow accessory dwelling units in the R2, R1A, R1B, and RA zoning districts with site plan approval. Before we open it up to the public, have the board members had a chance to review the updated bylaw, which we had discussed and made edits to when we had our joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, Select Board and Zoning Board of Approvals?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard or comment on the accessory dwelling unit bylaw? Sorry, anyone from the public who wishes to be heard on the accessory dwelling unit bylaw? Hearing none, I will open it up for a vote, or open it up for a recommendation on whether anyone from this board wishes to put this forward as a sponsored article on the December special town meeting.
I'll open it up.
So moved.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chad?
Is there a special town meeting in December?
Yes. Well, there is a place mark for one if articles are
Presented.
presented.
I'll be a nay.
4-1?
So there's a special meeting that's taking place anyways, or no? Or is this triggering a special meeting?
The special meeting has already been put forward
Okay.
on a 4-1 vote
Okay.
from the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
Select Board, sorry.
So this is just gonna be added to it.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I can speak to that a little bit. So,
Please.
there have been some competing tracks on this thing. So December 12th was held as a potential special town meeting date. It's typical to have a special town meeting. Usually we'd have it in October, November, but given the elections and the workload in the clerk's office, it was expressed that the preference would be that if possible, we'd avoid one, or if we had to have one, we'd have it in December, before the end of the calendar year. The ADU element popped up in August when the governor signed into law the housing bill that created the ADU element by right in communities, that goes into effect on February 2nd. On a separate track, there was a conversation and a vote in May pertaining to MBTA communities. We received a grant award in early October in the amount of $2 million that.
Can you speak up?
Sure. We received a grant award in October in the amount of $2 million that expressly stated if we weren't in compliance with MBTA communities by December 31st, that we would lose the grant, which prompted a citizen's petition. And so, to answer the question of whether or not there is a special town meeting, there was a December 12th placeholder date. With the initiation and introduction of a citizen's petition, there will be a special town meeting on December 12th.
Okay.
One way or another, independent of the ADU.
Okay, thank you. So I will reopen the vote now, knowing, and with Justin's clarification, that regardless on the vote of ADUs, there would be a special town meeting on December 12th. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous, 5-0. Again, as Justin mentioned, there were two tracks. I'm going to now close the public hearing on the ADU. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5, Middleton Planning Board will also hold a public hearing tonight to review a proposal to amend the zoning bylaw map. Prior to doing so, we're going to have discussion on the MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District that would allow multifamily dwellings by right and amend the zoning map to include certain parcels identified with the proposed overlay district. As Justin had mentioned, there were two potential tracks for this. One was a planning board sponsored article at a special town meeting. Another was a citizen's petition. I indicated in October we had 3 members of the planning board there, so I deferred to tonight's meeting that I was not a proponent of the planning board sponsoring this coming back at a special town meeting, that if it were to come back, it should be an organic effort by citizens within the community. It is not something that the town is sponsoring. That being said, as I mentioned, next week, as a requirement, the planning board procedurally will make a recommendation in positive or negative on that citizen's petition. So that being said, I would like to open it up to a member of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee, if someone is here tonight to speak to changes to the previously failed attempt back in May, and talk about some of the changes to that bylaw. And at that point, I would open it up to any members of the board if they wish to sponsor an article at town meeting.
Hey folks, so Bill Renaud, member of the Zoning Bylaw Committee. You had a letter drafted to you folks noting...
Can you speak louder, please? Yeah, I don't think any of your mics are on.
No, they're not.
They're not, they're for the folks on the TV.
But it doesn't project out
doesn't
to the
project,
audience,
I
it just
understand.
captures audio for folks at home, so we'll try to be mindful to speak up, even though it feels like we're shouting at you.
Sure. So Bill Renaud, member of the zoning, of the Bylaw Review Committee. The Bylaw Review Committee met on November 7th to discuss the article. It was voted 3-1 to not support the article as written. We continued some dialogue, and we've highlighted that in a letter that came to you folks today. Basically, we had 3 suggested changes to the bylaw. First being related to requiring a proponent that was going to say, file a project for the new overlay district, that they would have to use either the underlying zoning only or the new district, so that essentially would not allow somebody to have a lot that would include a commercial property and a residential property. We also looked at the dimensional controls and recommended some increases to the dimensional controls so that smaller subdivisions and infills couldn't happen. So that increased the frontage from 200 to 400, 400 to 600. It increased the lot size from 3.5 acres to 4.5 acres. And then also the square footage per unit recommended the increase. So what was proposed was actually a 17 unit per acre, and the requirement at the state's only 15, so that just aligns it with the state law. And then lastly, there was a typo, including an extra word. We just recommended removing that too. So again, so we voted 3-1 not to support it, but we do have these recommendations for moving forward.
Thanks, Bill. So just to clarify, and the way I understood it was, in order for residential units to exist, essentially the towers would either have to come, if in that specific facility, the towers would have to come down.
Yep, yeah, correct.
In order to create something like that. And in the separate portion where there's like 10 to 15 units, it would require all of those individuals to sell off their equity and their stakes in those separately deeded lots and properties in order for a developer to potentially put what sounds like it could be like 60 units, potentially.
Yep, correct. So the two parcels that kind of wing the towers, those would all have to be sold off to do any type of higher density development.
Okay.
Currently, all the towers are twice the density that's in the bylaw, so I can't imagine that anyone would buy out every resident in
Doesn't seem
that,
like a good investment.
knock it down, and then put up half the units. I don't see that as an option.
Yeah, doesn't seem
And
like
then
a good
across the street, you have the hotel. That has obviously the hotel, we have the water park that's there too, and then the residential, the commercial building that's there with the garage. Basically, you wouldn't be able to maintain any of those commercial uses and then add in the residential, so you'd have to subdivide separately.
You have to raise all the commercial components of it, including the parking garage.
You technically can have a parking garage in the bylaw, but you would have to get rid of the commercial uses that are there. So they could reuse that if they chose to. But again, I think the more important thing is that, we looked at and we discussed about infill subdivisions. So create an A&R that would allow the commercial property to stay and then have an infill in certain areas. Well, we looked at the area. Well, I looked at the area, so I did a pretty good analysis at the building commissioner's office, kind of looking at the site plans that were approved and the zoning approvals that they had to see what would actually be able to be built. So these add some protections to get rid of those sort of loophole developments that I saw. So basically, by increasing the size alone to 4.5 acres, that really excludes them from not having to take down one of those buildings. So these kind of more of a belt and suspenders approach is what I would say. But again, I don't see, there's definitely no chance that 750 units are being built. I can guarantee that. The question would be if there's a smaller piece of a development that could be potentially done. From my analysis, I think these close all those loopholes.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
To clarify with the board, again, I'm going to ask if anyone has the appetite or anyone wishes to sponsor a separate zoning bylaw from the citizens petition at a December town meeting. Regardless, if we choose not to, these modifications that were suggested by the zoning bylaw review committee may be introduced as an amendment to the citizens petition on the floor of the December meeting. So with that being said, I will open it up. Does anyone wish to discuss it in more detail, or does anyone wish to sponsor a separate bylaw for the December meeting? Hearing none, the planning board will not be sponsoring a bylaw at the special town meeting. We will be meeting again next week as indicated for the specific citizens petition. With that being said, I know that we had it on the agenda, and a lot of people here wish to speak to the MBTA Communities Act. I will open up the floor. This is not going to be a debate, so we're not going to have a whole lot of back and forth. I please ask that you respectfully, make your comments directed to the planning board. Again, we're going to withhold any kind of feedback or any kind of conversation on the bylaw until next week, procedurally, when we can make a recommendation on the citizens petition. So with that being said, floor is open.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So, based on what this gentleman just said in terms of the proposals, that would be to amend the zoning that the citizens petition is going to be voting on. What this gentleman just said, the belt and suspenders,
Yeah.
would be then added as an amendment at the December 12th meeting?
It would be at the December 12th meeting, correct? It would
And
not be something that we would be discussing.
So would we have to know to add to, I mean, procedurally, is that something you guys would make sure comes up?
Go ahead, Justin.
I'm just-
So I can talk about process a little bit. So excellent question, and you're following along, which is great because there's a lot of moving parts here. And so the question is what Mr. Renaud was just describing, is that something that would go forward as its own separate article, or is it something that if there was an appetite among the citizens, that it could be an amendment to the proposed citizens petition that is going to be discussed next Wednesday, the 20th, voted on at a December 12th town meeting, just to catch everybody up if you couldn't hear. And so the answer is, it is typical when there's a citizens petition or if there's an amendment like that, that if those individuals reach out and coordinate with town hall, we will proof those in advance with legal counsel. We did it last year heading into annual town meeting. There was a potential citizens petition pertaining to the budget, because when that gets to town meeting floor, we want to make sure that it's something that's actually viable and legal, and we're not just kind of winging it on town meeting floor.
I just like those belt and suspenders.
So Justin, question for you.
Sure.
When we open the public hearing next week, we're going to make a recommendation based on the existing citizens petition. Does it make sense also for the board to consider the potential amendment and make a recommendation on the amendment as well? Or can we only make a recommendation on the citizens petition?
I would want to just confirm with legal counsel, but I believe you could provide a recommendation. I would just want to make sure between now and next Wednesday that it's a fully baked proposal, because I would hate for you all to weigh in on it
Yep.
and then have it shift between the 20th and the 12th. So that would be my only concern, but we can
Okay.
work over the next week to tighten something up based on what we just heard and what was delivered, and bring something
Yep.
forward that's more formal.
I think we would all be open to, a more perfect version, like you had mentioned before, of the citizens petition. So, if that opportunity is there to look at both that and an amendment, I think we'd be willing to do that.
Okay. And then also, I would say it's worth mentioning coordinating with the clerk's office, and of course, at the grace of Madam Moderator over here, just to make sure we're checking all the boxes.
Yep, perfect.
I have a question regarding how to tell which one is which. So when I went out, I have a copy that has some updates, right? Which one is this? So I just want to make sure that I know which petition is being discussed next week, because now I'm really confused. There's amendment this, there's the petition that, there's the original one. How do we tell what's what?
Could I see that closer?
Of course.
Sorry.
I printed it from your planning board site.
Is it the one that was specific to the November 13th meeting?
Well,
There are like a couple different.
There's a first draft, there's a second draft, there's a few PDFs.
Okay. If it's specific to the November 13th meeting, the board has decided not to present that as an option at,
So like everything is eliminated about affordable
Yeah.
housing in that version, and that was what was on your site, so.
Yeah,
So I'm confused.
Sure, so, and let me provide a little clarity. So there are a couple different iterations floating around. So there's the version that existed going into town meeting in May, this past May. There were actually several versions of that existed prior to that. So we'll go through the website and make sure it's clear. They're usually dated, so you can tell you're going to want to look for the latest and greatest. The citizens petition fully strikes, I believe, section 8.8.8, which is the affordability component. And I believe that is on the website in the form of a PDF. I'll double check though, and come back around and confirm. But we can call that out specifically. And then I would say, just to confirm, what is there, by and large, needs to stay the same. Small changes, if we have legal counsel review it, that is permissible, but there couldn't be a substantial change. That is what will go forward. It'll be printed in the warrant as such. In terms of what was just discussed in the form of an amendment, that's something that if next week the planning board determines it's something that they're in favor of, we can publish as well, saying that, please take this into consideration. But it's not going to be in the final text of what goes in the warrant book. And so that's something that we're going to have to be very careful on town meeting floor to explain, because it's easy to lose people when you start amending things on the fly, and then people, are we voting on the article, or are we voting on the amendment, or are we voting to amend the amendment, and then people just get lost. So I'll make sure that the website reflects what's new.
And do we know that whatever is going to be discussed next week and brought to warrant will satisfy what is required for the MBTA zoning law? Or, is the citizens petition, does it satisfy that requirement?
So once received, we immediately started going through it and picking it apart. It's been sent to legal counsel, and then there is an option that we've engaged that the state can pre-approve, because my concern, and concern shared by my team as well, is we don't want to bring something forward, have this contentious argument in town, just to have it not stand up legally, or have the state come back and say like, hey, this doesn't meet muster. And so we'll have that confirmation well before December 12th.
Will you have it for next week's planning board discussion?
I would love to. I can't commit to it though, because I'm relying on them to turn it around.
Just to clarify as well, I just checked the planning board website here on the town website. So if that document was the one that's listed as MBTA Communities draft as advertised for November 13th hearing, that's what we had just shot down and decided not to bring forward in the town meeting. Right below that, there is a copy of the citizens petition MBTA Communities, and it says as advertised for the November 20th. So that would be the version that people would be wanting to take a look at. Please.
Barbara Pacelli, Town Moderator. I just want to follow up on something the Town Administrator said, just to be perfectly clear on this issue concerning amendments. People are welcome to make amendments on the floor, and we encourage participation to the extent that people want to participate. But it's very important that if you have an amendment, that you provide it to the clerk's office in advance so that we have an opportunity to review it. And there's no guarantee that your amendment is going to be legal or it's going to be within the scope. And whether or not it's in the scope is going to be ultimately within my decision and my discretion. So we can't guarantee to any one person at this point that an amendment that you make will be allowed on town meeting floor. So it's to everybody's advantage to get those amendments into us early, so we have an opportunity to look at them, and we're happy to work with anybody that does submit one.
Thank you. Sir?
It is getting kind of confusing, like Lydia Berkey said, with the amendments and how it's being processed. It did get voted down originally. Would it be smart for the town to approach it as, again, a straight-up vote, where instead of having all these amendments, kind of, yes, some parts of them are good, some maybe not, but it's getting like a little too much where it already passed?
So I think I think to answer your question, the town is not making any type of, taking any type of stance or making any kind of, taking any kind of position behind the citizens petition. Our board will make a recommendation on the substance of the petition, but as far as influencing or deciding a vote or the legitimacy of a revote, that's not something within our board's purview. Once the citizens petition is filed with the clerk's office, as long as it's deemed by legal counsel to be substantially different or materially different than what was previously proposed at the spring meeting, then it would go forward.
So possibly that vote on the 12th of December could be a different.
As of now, where our board is positioned to just vote on what is shown on the citizens petition. If there is a potential amendment that's filed before our meeting, well, like I mentioned, I'm certainly happy to take a look at that and make a decision on that as well. Yes, please.
Hi, everyone. Kendra Petrone. So first, I just want to say thank you for doing this and having the public be able to come here and sort of speak. This is such a conflicted issue, I think, in our town. Just my thoughts, and I'll be very quick. I think for most of us, the 270 of us that sent a letter to the planning board and signed it, supporting a no vote, the no vote that we did support on May 14th, I think the viewpoint is very simple, that on May 14th, everybody in Middleton understood the rules and we understood the risk. We were very clear on what you were informing us, that we could lose out on $2 million, we could lose out on $20 million, and if Mara Healy decides to build an entire castle, she could do that. And we understood all of the details of what the MBTA Act included, and we were very clear on it. And I know that the frustration in the town now is that there's no new information. There's nothing new that we didn't understand then that is being presented now. And I think that the biggest issue within our community, and we love this town, everybody that lives here works hard, they care for their property very well, and they appreciate the land that we have. And I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and that's the problem. That's why nobody, well, most people, and the majority voted no in May, don't want this, because we don't trust that whatever we try to do in that area will never be built on. And I think, I just want to make it clear that most of us in the town, the biggest thing we want is trust, leadership, and respect. And we want it from all of our committees and all of our boards, and we want it from our town. And I think that just the idea of having a special town meeting on December 12th, 2 weeks before Christmas, it's a pretty awful ask. I mean, I think everybody knows that everybody here will be busy with family. I mean, we'll make it work if we have to, but I think that's what's not settling very well with most people, is that we had a loud and clear vote. We were very open and honest on the rules and the risk of what we were going to miss out on, and we still said no thank you. So just my thought, and I think that still having a meeting on December 12th looks really bad, and it's a horrible thing to be doing to the people of this town. I think we made the vote, we decided, and I'm just curious, sort of a rhetorical question. So if the vote passes on December 12th, say more yes people show up, then what happens? Can we petition again, and then there's another no vote, and does it keep going back and forth, and how long does that go on? So basically, to end in closing, you know, how sacred are the votes we take at town meeting? I guess that's what I'm hoping, and I think the people here are hoping, that when we vote on something that conflicted, that serious, and that obviously contested, when is it solidified? When will it matter? And so I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for trust, honesty, and respect in our leaders for the town, to believe that our vote matters and that our voices matter, and that they're not going to just be changed because somebody doesn't like it. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Tasha Bansfield, White Lane. I believe I shared with everybody on the board. I didn't hear back from anybody, which was a little bit disappointing. I've been a chair on a board in town for 3 years, and when someone sends me an email, I minimally write back, thanks for your email. So But I wanted to share with the public, the organization in Healy's administration that is pushing all of this law on us is called the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. And I know Bill Renault came up here from the Bylaw Review Committee and told us all that he guarantees that they won't make any changes. Once we vote yes, there won't be any changes made to the overlay. It literally says on every approved letter that goes into the EOHLC, it says, the EOHLC may establish a system to monitor compliance over time to ensure that approved districts allow multifamily housing in accordance with the criteria under which they were approved. It also says the EOHLC may rescind a determination of district compliance or require changes to the district to remain in compliance as per Section 10 of the guidelines. That is my major issue with this. Regardless of the location of the overlay, regardless of anything else, if we vote yes, we are handing the keys over to the state. They can come in at any, it says it on the paper. They can change it at will. They own it. Like, I don't, it's very frustrating that seems to be not understood at this point. But the other thing I wanted to ask, the state law says that if an article is shot down, basically voted no at town meeting, it cannot be brought back within 2 years without significant changes. And so the citizens petition, all it did was remove the affordable housing component. That's really not a significant change. I'm not an attorney, but the impact to the town will not change. All you're doing is taking out the affordable and putting in more market rate. So I would argue that the citizens petition is not a significant change. It's just removing the affordable housing piece. So I think that's something that needs to be discussed minimally at the hearing next week. I'd love to hear from the town's attorney on whether that's even legal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, and thank you, Natasha, just on the last piece, legal counsel did confirm that that is a substantial change. Legal counsel did confirm that that is a substantial change.
So in that case, the vote sorry, in that case, the vote should hold, because that would be considered a change going the other way. I mean,
I don't understand.
I think so what Natasha had mentioned was we can't vote on the same article unless it's substantially changed within 2 years. So it wouldn't stay because the legal counsel has, in their determination, viewed the removal of the affordability elements to be substantial, which changes the bylaw substantially, in his opinion.
Jeff Carver, 22 Meeting House Square. I don't know if I agree with you that that's a substantial change. It's the same lots, it's the same use, everything's the same. I don't agree with that interpretation. But if the goal was just to change something in it, to make it a substantial change, I wish they had changed something else. The other one had 10% affordable in it, so there was some public good. We have an affordable housing trust that's trying to get affordable housing in here. We talk about people who need age in place, we need affordable housing, and if they were going to take something out, I wish they took something else out. To take that out, whatever little public good might have come from this is now gone, and there's absolutely no public good.
This whole process, so understanding what the state asked us to submit, we did that, and then it got changed, and we took out affordable housing. My understanding, and I could be wrong, is that is a requirement to be to meet the requirements of the state program. So why would we submit it, and knowing that it doesn't meet the requirements?
We haven't submitted anything to the state.
Okay.
It was.
But so why would we even petition that? Because so here's the rules 1 through 10. You have to hit these. Maybe we hit 1 through 9. I'm just saying that, arbitrarily. Why would we even be discussing something that doesn't meet the requirements of the state?
So there was nothing submitted to the state to know whether or not it met their requirements.
But they didn't ask us to include
affordable housing?
They asked us to meet the law and to adhere to their requirements, which there's pending litigation, like many of you know, in the town of Middleton. Whether those should be requirements versus guidelines. I think that's one of the big aspects of what everyone is looking for to see come out of the pending litigation.
It just seems like there's obviously a lot of thought and controversy around this.
But the process would be, it would have to be approved at a town meeting before anything gets submitted to the state for review.
So we're going on requirement versus guideline. That's kind of the gray area.
Well, we need, in order to, before we would send anything to the state, it would be approved by the town first, which nothing has been approved yet. Sir?
So,
Can you stand up and announce?
sorry, 18 Bellevue Ave, Gary Dini. If it got voted down in the past, and then the grant was submitted after the vote, wouldn't that just void what you just said about?
I think the grant and the vote on MBTA are two separate.
Well, they coincide with each other. To get that grant, you have to approve the MBTA. The MBTA got voted down. The grant was processed after the vote already was a no.
I think it's also important to note that that grant had been in the works for several months before the town even voted no. That grant did not just pop up all of a
Was
sudden.
that always tied to the MBTA vote?
No, we didn't receive approval of that grant until October.
Then it's still pending the MBTA vote. It's not two
Correct.
separate things.
Yep. If the MBTA vote, if we go to December and the vote remains no, I think it sends a pretty clear message, one, to the state, how awful the law is. And I'm not up here arbitrating on behalf of the state and trying to say that this was a well-put-together law. I don't think anyone here that is supportive of the article, and again, we won't find that out until we review it in more detail and have deliberation next week, but I don't think anyone on this board feels that that is a good law, or thinks the state did a nice job in putting it
But
together.
there's still a lot of questions on it. Is there a way to postpone that vote or to figure out where it stands until, everything can get?
I believe December 31st
Last day.
is the deadline for compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
Sir?
I have one question. So if that grant, I know the grant was in the works prior to this board meeting, so if that $2 million wasn't at stake at this point, would we even be having these meetings? Would this meeting even take place at the planning board level? If we didn't have the $2 million on the table and it was voted no, we even be having this meeting? Or would we be having a meeting December 12th?
I don't know. Can't answer that.
I could add, something to that. The ADU component, Dave, was happening one way or another by mid-August. So I don't know, I couldn't tell you definitively if the MBTA communities thing would have come up, but it's certainly what prompted the conversation this time around.
I understand it's placed on, and that's a valid point. I don't think there was a lot of opposition with that. I just don't think that the MBTA issue would be on this right now, or being brought before the town for a second vote, unless that $2 million is on the table. That's just my opinion.
Sir?
I'm Anthony Marabito, 8 Nichols Lane, right down the street from where this is proposed to be. Been there 23 years, got a long background in real estate, did a fair amount of it, can look me up at the registry of deeds. Personally, I looked at this, I kind of like it. It brings a lot into the town, it's really nestled into that one little corner. Most of the traffic coming in and out of that is up and down Ferncroft Road onto Route 1. We got the housing authority right there. You've already got public housing there. When I moved in, my mother was like, "Oh, what are those houses? They call them the triangle houses. It's public housing, Ma." Because you're moving them out, Those kids are in my backyard. There's some of my children's best friends living down there. I'm looking at that property, and especially where the guy was talking before, where they're going to limit it, by making the parcels larger if you need it like that. That's never going to change from a tower. Nobody's going to knock a tower down to put up housing there. I just don't see it, especially if they're putting the restrictions on it. So my 2 cents worth, I'm sure that a lot of people here know more about it than I do. I know whatever goes on, you guys are pros, you're going to figure it out. I mean, you're on it with the lawyers and everything, and you guys live and eat and breathe in this all the time, and other people in the community are also active. So I'm cool with it. I think it would be a good thing. Whatever is going to wind up, I'm sure it's going to be fine. The town will survive. It's not going to be. But I just wanted to voice my support because I am basically in a butter, and I think that would be a different view for people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate as well, anything specific to the plan itself, I ask that we hold that till next week. Any general comments on the law itself, happy to continue the conversation. But anything specific to what we'll be discussing next week, again, I ask that we reserve that until the 20th. Ma'am?
Hi, Rachel Nemeth from 29 North Main Street. I would just like to address a point that one of us just brought up. Initially, the MBTA overlay, I believe, was passed by our legislature as including the affordable housing component. However, it has disappeared. So those people who think that that component is part of the law probably think that because originally it was passed that way. However, you'll notice it's disappeared now, and that is just one evidence of how there is no sturdy guideline here. This is a movable guideline, and it can be changed at will, and it already has been. So I would just like to point that out to clear up that potential confusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, look forward to seeing you all here next one.
All of us are talking about the effect on, you're not considering the effect on the schools at all, especially the schools, and that was discussed at the last school board meeting, that this could decimate the town with what could come in, the number of children that couldn't handle it, and the new school would have to be built at a cost of, I think it was what, $100 million that was discussed? So I think you're negating that serious impact that could happen here. It's a shame that you're not even talking about school, police, or fire. It's almost a joke that you're not. I don't understand how you're not talking about this. And Justin, I don't know why you're not bringing this up. I have a real issue with this citizens petition, which I know we're going to talk about next week. But it's more than obvious that a layperson did put this together. I'd like to know what board members, including you, Justin, helped put this together. Did you help put this together, this
Again, I'm going to ask that anything be directed at our board.
Okay, I'll direct it towards you. I mean, Justin's been talking the whole time. I mean, it's only obvious to ask him similar questions. So, did you help with this? I'm trying to understand this.
Mr.
No
Chair,
layperson
I'm
can
happy
read
to
this.
answer that question through the chair. So and this was referenced earlier in this meeting, at the joint meeting with the planning board and zoning board, there was a version brought forward from the town that withheld the affordable component.
A citizen petition? I'm sorry.
No, it's a version that we brought forward. So like we mentioned, where there were two tracks, and at one point in time, it was discussed whether or not the select board or planning board, one or the other, or together, had an appetite to bring forward an article. Since that point, it's now a moot point because a citizen's petition was brought forward. But the removal of the affordable component was something that was brought forward early on in that conversation as an option if the planning board or select board had an interest in pursuing that. But it since went by the wayside.
I still didn't answer my question. You went around it.
So the version that you're referencing, so one piece at a time. So, and I apologize, I don't know your name, but with the nice scarf. Sue. So the version that Sue has in her hand and is referencing was a version from the town that was created by my office. It's on the town website. We're not hiding anything there. It's there. There's a spotlight on it. It was discussed at the joint meeting that some iteration of that version is clearly what the citizens petition spring forth from. But the second piece of that I would also offer that was referenced earlier is anytime a citizen or resident wants to bring forth any type of initiative in town, including a citizen's petition, it comes through typically my office or the clerk's office or someone in town hall, and it's reviewed by our team to make sure it lines up with our bylaws, and it's reviewed by legal counsel. And we did the same thing last May with one individual standing in the back of the room regarding the budget process. We'll help anybody. They wanted to split the budget. We were going for an override, and we wanted to break out public safety from the schools or whatever iteration there was. So yes, the answer is yes.
And it's an article on the warrant already. That was different. I was at that meeting. This is a whole different thing. 4 members of the select board, not Jeff, thankfully, who supports the townspeople here from what I see, said no to a warrant. Never in history in Middleton did you open a warrant with an empty warrant for December 12th. This is all like this smoke and mirrors game of first it started with the school roof, was never going to be a necessity to put on for December 12th. Then it started with the ADUs. Oh my God, everybody's going to be building ADUs. We need to get this on December 12th. Now it's a citizen's petition. The only reason we're doing it, spending maybe $5,000, $3,000 to $5,000 for a special town meeting is because of citizen's petition. And there's no way, no offense to Mr. Bourgeois, but he couldn't have done this on his own. I have a real issue that public records show that
Wait a minute.
townspeople, excuse me, yeah?
Well, no, you
I'm
just said
speaking,
I
you're
couldn't
not
do it
gonna-
on my own.
No, I
Yeah,
said, I know.
please,
Yeah, no.
excuse me.
You can hand me, Greg.
I guess I did, but you're wrong, because I can do it on my own.
Yeah. Please
I
continue
said-
to direct everything
I
to
said,
this
with due
board.
respect, I'm not having a debate, and I don't think I'm.
Yeah,
I'm
you're pretty
speaking-
good at disparaging people.
I'm pretty good. I just said it's a lot for.
You said I couldn't do it on my own.
I said
I can
don't-
do it on my
Yeah,
own.
just tell him
I
no,
don't
no.
know you. I don't know. For a citizen, a layperson to do this, it's quite expensive.
Again, please,
I'm trying, but
this
you
is
kept
not a debate.
interrupting me.
Direct it to me.
I'm trying, but you just kept interrupting.
Right.
You should have shut him down.
Mr. Chair, so if I could respond to two of those points, and I've heard a lot about the Fuller Meadow roof, and we talked about this recently at a meeting last week. We only just officially got word that the $300,000 appropriation from last May would be enough to cover it. I told the select board this past week that we got official word from MSBA because they didn't vote on that until October 30th. So that legitimately, I know sometimes things look a certain way, and I 100% understand what you're saying. In terms of like a layperson couldn't put forth what's in the citizen's petition, it's literally deleting one section, 8.8.8. Highlight, delete, it's one piece. It's not terribly complicated.
But you just said you did help out with it. I mean, you just said I just couldn't
A
hear
public
you.
version was provided to the joint meeting with the planning board and the ZBA, maybe 2 weeks ago now. It was a public document. But once again, I want to express, it was literally highlighting one section and deleting it. I'd love to take credit for that, but it's not that, the work there isn't that impressive.
It seems quite extensive, but I'll take your word for that, Justin. But I still think that at the beginning when I started this, the schools, the police and fire are not being considered at all, and the impact it will have. I think that no one's putting that on the table on the board here, or the zoning board, and the select board except for Jeff on the select board.
Mr. Chair, if I could answer an element of that as well, and so I obviously can't speak for the schools. We're separate entities, but I will say that question arose going into last May for the vote, and we did address it. And so the question was, if you're looking at this overlay in this section for MBTA, and if there's a concern that a bunch of housing is going to be built there, which it seems like most indicators show wouldn't occur, but let's say even if it did, that style of housing, is it conducive typically to school-aged children? And so in trying to make a data-driven decision, we reached out to Scott Morrison and said, there are 7 parcels in this proposed district. This is the address. I don't want exact addresses. I don't want student names. But can you tell me how many school-aged children live within this proposed district? I was expecting the answer to be 20 or 30. The answer was 0, not a single kid. And the data just shows that that type of housing is not conducive to school-aged children. And so with that said, I'm not on the school committee. I do not represent the schools, but just, we did address that last May. I don't want people to think that we weren't doing our job. We looked into it. We're legitimately trying to cover every angle here. And that was a major angle. Is there a concern, say we're wrong and something gets built there, is there going to be an influx of school-age children? Is it going to strain the school's resources? Is it going to trigger the need for a large infrastructure upgrade and building new schools to the tune of millions of dollars? And the answer was no. So that's one piece. In terms of police and fire, we are presently understaffed. And, I'm happy to say that by the grace of the people of Middleton, we're building a new public safety building. But if anybody watched our budget conversations going into last May, I'd be the first person to tell you we need more people. We need more police officers and firefighters right now under current conditions. And so I share the concern. If something were to be built there, which I don't believe, using my expertise and experience, that something would be, my complaint and grievance would be the same, as we need more people right now.
Again, I'm going to ask everyone to direct their questions and comments to the board here. And again, if it's related to a specific element of the petition, please hold it till next week. If it's generally speaking related to the law and the legislation, happy to continue the
I
conversation.
think this is general. I'm Sheila McNeil, 5 Country Club Lane. I didn't introduce myself before. Just staying with the infrastructure, police, fire, and schools, one thing that needs to be considered, and it may not have been, but I just asked, sewage. I know we're not septic there, and that was highlighted in many of the proposals. The sewage system is strained with the results of it not working, so I don't know if that's been considered, but something that should be addressed.
Yeah, so anything sewage related would, Title V and everything like that, that would be a developer's nightmare, and another reason why in the past and in prior conversations, we felt like this was not a desirable developer's dream should the overlay be put there, so.
Just a point of clarification, they're on the South Essex Sewage District there.
There is
It's not septic, it's not Title V.
No, it's not septic, it's a sewage,
So,
exactly.
South Essex.
But to add to the chair's point, if I could, that was a consideration. And and once again, to break it apart into 2 pieces. So one is the septic, and that was something that we were looking at. And a good example, real-world example to point to within the past year or so is the 40B development at Angelica's. And that developer came in, he wanted to do 200 units high in the sky, and then he found out the harsh reality that even though he had the space, what's underground wouldn't allow him to build that many units. It got knocked down to 60. And that's just the reality that we're looking at. And from the SESD component, the South Essex Sewerage District, that's a sewer district that's not controlled by Middleton. We couldn't permit a project there even if we wanted to. And if anybody thinks Salem is going to do us a favor or development in Middleton and say, yeah, we'll give you capacity, it's never going to happen. Which, I get people's concerns, but once again, I want to stress, we have ruminated on this. We have gone over it 1,000 times over. We're not going in blind on it. We're trying to cover every single element of this. And so if people have questions, through the chair, please, and especially on the 20th. But we're happy to answer them. There's nothing to hide here. We're all on the same team. We all want the same thing here. So.
Just as a point of interest, I'm on the SESD in mine, and there's a pump station at the bottom of Ferncroft Road, and they're always working on that. And just as a developer, if they're going to upgrade that capacity, that's going to be très expensivo. And so all the more so if you put this overlay district in, we get the grant money, it's one more reason nobody's going to want to build housing there.
Thank you. Anyone? I will say before we close, we do have an open seat on the planning board for an alternate position. Looks like some of you guys may be available on Wednesday nights, so if anyone is interested, it is a year-to-year appointed position, joint appointment by the select board and the planning board. Please submit your papers to the town clerk's office. We'd be happy to bring another alternate on. We have an open alternate spot. So with that said, I'd like to close this public hearing. And we look forward to opening a new public hearing on the 20th related to that citizens petition.
Mr. Chair, before you hit the gavel, just point of order, your vote regarding ADUs, was that a vote to move it forward, or a vote to recommend or not recommend?
It was a vote to sponsor it as a warrant article.
Okay.
As a bylaw warrant article.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Very good. That said, I will close the public hearing. Any items not reasonably anticipated by the chair in 48 hours? I don't have anything. So with that, I'd like to adjourn.